Hello, I'm Larry Salibra, a member of the Royal Hong Kong Yacht Club. SV Delos is one of the most popular sailing channels on YouTube. The channel follows the adventures of Brian Trautman, his family, and friends as they've sailed around the world on a Amel Super Maramu, a 53-foot sailing ketch, for the past decade. Recently, Brian and his team produced a documentary miniseries covering their trip with the 59 North team as they sailed around the Norwegian island of Svalvard and into the Arctic Circle. Brian and the Delos team kindly let us screen the 2-hour miniseries at our club this past February. Prior to the event, on February 7th, 2023, I had the pleasure of sitting down to talk with Brian about his experiences. I hope you enjoy our discussion. Thanks for watching.
Really excited to have you here. We have Brian from Delos. Where are you right now, Brian?
Right now in a place called Puerto Penasco Rocky Point. In English, it would be, it'd be called Rocky Point, Spanish Puerto Penasco. And it's, I don't know if you know where Arizona is, Phoenix. It's about a 5-hour drive down directly south of Phoenix, kind of at the very, very top of the Sea of Cortez. It's a very cool spot. It's the middle of the desert.
Cool. And I see that you're not on Delos right now. She's in the
No,
boat, right?
no, we're actually, Delos is in the yard. We've been on the hard here since October. We hauled out and we went to the boat show and we went to go visit our families. And then we came back. We took a little bit of time in Sweden to see Karen's family. And then we got back here just after the new year, early January. And we've been working hard. Got a lot of projects going on the boat, a lot of maintenance. You know, she's now 23 years old, 22 years old. And so, you know, pretty much all the major systems are in need of a refit because we have some pretty big plans to cross the Pacific. So we're going to set sail in March and April and then cross over to French Polynesia, which I'm really excited about because I did that sail a number of years ago and Kaza never got to do that sail. And so now it's like my turn to go back a number of years later, like knowing a bunch more than I did the first time and also share it with Karen and Kaza, which is super cool. So we're like replacing the water maker, new transmission, new power inverters, new solar panels. I mean, there's like, it's going to be a solid 2 months of work by the time we're all done. Yeah.
Wow. I think many of us here are boat owners. And so we sort of feel your pain and anxiety, but also excitement at getting it done.
Yeah, exactly.
I just when you say that, I just think back to when you first crossed the South Pacific. It was a totally different time in your sailing career. So you were relatively early, I think, like you had only been sailing for a couple of years, right? Did you feel like sort of anxiety at that time, or like, did you say like, this is something, you know, can I do it? Like I have to prove that I'm going to do it yourself?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I had mostly done a lot of lake sailing in Lake Washington around Seattle, and then a little bit more in the Puget Sound. I joined a race team up there, which turned out to be a great deal because then I got to push some pretty big boats to their limits and see what a boat could take. And I found out that it's way more than you as a person can handle. So that can sometimes be comforting. But then I went out and made that left turn from the Strait of Juan de Fuca and made a hop down to San Francisco. And that was the first big stretch on my own. And, you know, I was prepared for this terrible weather. And so I had a bunch of really experienced crew with me. And, you know, we didn't see more than 5 knots of wind for the whole time. So it was sort of yes, there was anxiety, but then nothing came of it. And then we were able to make coastal hops down, and we just sort of gradually learned and began to trust ourselves in the boat and gain more confidence. But still pretty green, pretty amateur to be crossing an ocean like that, you know. Luckily, Delos is a pretty good boat, and she can really take care of you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That just makes me think. We did a trip out to the oil rigs in the South China Sea over Christmas, and that was sort of my longest trip. And to do that, like I borrowed like a life raft and got like all the safety gear that probably didn't really need for such a short trip, but like, and it didn't need it, so it was great, and it was all very easy. but like, yeah, it's just really easy to relate to as a fellow sailor. So one of the reasons I proposed this event to our club was because our club is like, so we're in Hong Kong, and we are mostly a racing club. So we probably do like, I think 300 to 450 like sailing events a year if you count like each class as an event. So like every weekend we have like harbor racing in Victoria Harbor, and then we have like
That's
there's
awesome.
three other big clubs in Hong Kong, and they work together and arrange a sailing calendar, and they have like islands courses, geometric courses, like coastal racing inside Hong Kong waters. We have a race to the Philippines in April, a race to Vietnam, I think every other year, to Hainan. And it's very racing focused. And there was a decision, I think, in the 1960s that like the cruisers would sort of like separate off. And so, but cruisers we're still around here, but we're like a little bit like second class citizens. And so like most people that sail here get like experience racing. I wouldn't say second class citizens, but the club is very focused on racing. There are other organizations that do the cruising. But I think it would be really great. Like one of the things I liked about Delos is it takes cruising and says like, hey, this is like a thing. This is like a thing that people do as opposed to like just racing. Because I mean, like here people focus on like the America's Cup or like whatever.
Yeah.
There's like fleets of TB52s, like boats that like where it's really just a rich man sport where it's like how much money do you throw at the boat, and then people that are not super wealthy, they try to get a crew spot on like the best boat they can. They try to move up. And I thought it would be really interesting to share with our members like a different type of sailing, both the cruising that you do at Delos, which many people are familiar with, but I think also more of like the exploratory expedition type of thing that you did with the trip up to the Arctic Circle. So that was the motivation behind this event. So with that in mind, I mean, so you sort of answered that question. You have done some racing before, and you found it like a very useful, it sounds like, way to get into cruising to improve your skills. Or like, can you talk a little bit more about like your view of the relationship between racing and cruising? And is it something that's worth doing, or do you do racing to become a better cruiser, or is like racing just this totally separate thing that people shouldn't do?
No, I definitely think that a lot of the skills that I learned in racing, as far as like, trimming for optimal speed, like trimming, like tack lines, like these things, yes, they're nice, but in cruising, instead of trying to go as fast as possible, to me, it's all about like, well, we need to make this last as long as possible. And so the actual endurance of yourself and the boat and the crew becomes the major issue, because, hey, you know what, when you're racing, like, okay, the race is over, you're probably going to put the boat in a slip and you're going to go back and you're going to take a hot shower. Well, when you get off of a 22-day passage and you end up in some anchorage in the middle of nowhere, like, guess what? That's still your house. And if you broke your house on the way there, then you've got problems for the rest of the season. And we do tend to go out for a long time. So when we go out cruising, it's usually for a few months at a time, maybe crossing an ocean or exploring an island group. And we really make very few port calls. And so trying not to break stuff is like the ultimate concern. And then getting an extra quarter of a knot on one particular wind angle would be like maybe second or, third, definitely. I mean, the other thing about cruising boats is, I raced on a Santa Cruz 52 and a Far Design 39, both very cool boats, but both very stripped down, right? So, very bare, no air conditioning, no water maker, no systems, maybe like a very lightweight cooler to keep beer cold for the end of the race celebration, no door on the toilet because that was weight, take the floorboards out because that was weight, like, you're just filling it with sails and people to go fast. And then the cruising boat, to me, is all about comfort, comfort and safety. So like being able to take freshwater showers, like, being able to scuba dive off your own boat, being able to go to an anchorage and then have a big enough dinghy so that you can then go around and explore, or maybe having your toys so you can go surfing or kiteboarding or all that. So it's like, well, now we're trying to see how much weight can we actually put on this boat and still have it like sail relatively well for cruising.
Yeah, I know you guys have a lot of stuff on your boat. It's very impressive that it handles as well as it does.
Yeah.
So after sort of cruising for like around a decade or so, like I forget when it was, I think it was a couple of years now, you took a trip, you decided to go with Andy Schell and his team up to the Arctic Circle. I remember at one point you were getting Delos ready to go north into colder temperatures. You installed the diesel heater, but then I think COVID happened and you ended up going to Maine.
Yep. Exactly.
What was sort of the thought process of that? Like, were you originally thinking, hey, we're gonna spend time at higher latitudes, like long term, and then like?
Yeah, I mean, so we did do the trip up to Svalbard with our friends Andy and Mia on 59 North, and we really loved it. I mean, it's such a different world. It's such a different type of sailing, and of course, we love tropical sailing. We love jumping off the boat and swimming to the beach, but I think change is good, and change kind of excites and exhilarates you. And when we saw that type of environment up there, just the barren landscape and the huge glaciers and ice floating there in the water, it's just a otherworldly experience. And I thought it would be cool to finish the circumnavigation by, instead of going through the Panama Canal, to do the Northwest Passage. And so I had known some people who had done it before, and I did a bunch of research on the weather and what the timing. And so that was our intention, was to sail up the east coast of the US, fit the boat out, get our survival suits and put the heater in and everything else that we'd need for that trip. And then go up through Newfoundland, Labrador, and then up to Greenland, and then wait for the ice to melt. And if it melts, which it did, I think it did actually melt that year, but nobody could go through because of COVID. We were going to zip through the Northwest Passage, go around Alaska, and then boom, back in the Pacific and back in Seattle. Plans changed. We were locked down in the Bahamas, and we made it up as far as Maine, and the border was closed. We ended up staying up in Maine until, we saw freezing temperatures. We had ice on the deck. It got pretty cold up there. The heater worked great. The one thing we did find is that Delos is a fiberglass boat, which is fine. You can't go ramming it into icebergs or anything, but the main problem is she's not insulated. And so imagine a cold beer on a hot, humid climate, it just collects water on the can. That's exactly what happens to your hull if you're an uninsulated boat and it's cold outside and you have a heater running. You just get an incredible amount of condensation from the air and from you breathing. You're putting a lot of humidity into the air, and so the water gets on the hull and then it starts running down like into all your lockers, and it gets under your bed and it gets in your clothes and everything gets mildewy. And so after we did that, we're like, what, we love this, and we like the challenge of going to climates like this, but it does require, I think, a special purpose-built boat if you want to do it and do it right and be comfortable. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we decided. We're like, well, okay, it didn't work out. We got there and we can't go through anyway, COVID, blah, blah, blah. And so we just sailed south and went through the Panama Canal instead. I think if we ever get a new boat, it'll definitely be like an aluminum design, insulated, and kind of a more expeditionary style boat, like
wow,
a rough and rugged type boat. Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, we've been talking about that for quite a while. Me and Kaza. We really can't afford it still yet because one of these boats to build is like, it's
expensive,
crazy money. Yeah, never met a boat these days that's not expensive in some way, shape, or form.
They seem to stay roughly the same price they were when they were sold, but then the new price goes up.
Yeah, and so yeah, that was the goal. And someday we will do it. We've also had dreams of exploring Patagonia and around the west coast of South America, because that looks, any place that has an interesting topography for cruising. I always look at all the bays and the inlets and the waterways and think like, oh, that's got to be an amazing anchorage. That's got to be great. And I know some people just want to sail around for the pure sailing, like do a nonstop circumnavigation, and that just doesn't appeal to myself or Kaza. We're more of kind of destination sailors, or maybe we're travelers with a sailing problem or something like that, where we actually use the boat more. Yeah, explorers, sure, by sailboat. And so we more have used the sailboat as a kind of a platform to move us and our stuff around the planet. and still of course enjoy the ocean and do it, environmentally friendly and capturing the wind and living off solar and all this stuff. But yeah, just going, spending only time at sea really isn't our thing.
Yeah, no, I understand. Just it seems like when you're at sea, it's just a totally different mode, right? And you need to like there's stuff you can do and stuff you can't do. Like I think as a newer sailor, I had these visions of like, oh, I'm just gonna like hang out while I'm doing a passage and like do some work and like on the computer and like, and I was like, oh, that actually that's not gonna happen.
No, your time at sea is your time at sea, and
Yeah.
I like to read. I like to listen to podcasts, music, stare at the ocean. Getting on the computer, doing anything productive besides cooking for the crew is like not really. If the boat breaks, you got to fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the boat breaks.
Yeah, when the boat breaks, exactly.
Just a little bit more about the trip up north. So do you think like, so it sounds like, I mean, I've watched the video, the movie before everybody's going to see. It was really great. That's why I wanted to share it with our community. Do you think you'll do anything with the 59 North people in the future? Any more upcoming sort of like, it was really interesting to sort of have like different characters come into the Delos world.
Yeah, it was great.
As a viewer.
I wouldn't count it out. I mean, we hang out with Andy and Mia all the time. I mean, we see them when we go to Sweden. We see them at the boat show. We're pretty close friends, and so I mean, if there ever comes a time where we could hook up with them and do another sailing adventure, sure, we'd be keen. I really liked. People often wondered if it would be okay, since I'm usually the skipper, the captain of Delos, if it would be strange to not be the captain on a boat. And I really enjoyed it because I could focus on, enjoying the time. I could focus on the filming and just the experience instead of having to feel responsible and worrying about everybody on board and the boat and all this stuff. Like, that was his to worry about, and it was mine to enjoy. And so of course, we were a good crew and everything, or tried to be. But yeah, it was quite pleasant. I would definitely do it.
Cool. Well, I would look forward to that, and I would definitely watch. So many questions from what you've mentioned. What, like, I guess one of the questions some people have asked me to ask you, and also I wonder myself, is like this transition from sort of like you were working in tech and then full-time job, and then you sort of like transition into like now sailing is your full-time job. Did you have like what was that like the initial goal, or did you say like, oh, I'm going to take some time off, and then like I know you guys did some remote work for a while. I know you were like, I know like Brady was like working at a taco shop or something at some point. But
Yeah.
like how was it like did you have expectations for yourself in your career? Like, hey, I want to do this, but then those sort of changed as you realized Delos was for you? Like, what was the sort of the mental state?
Yeah, I mean, well, when I left, I had the idea that I was going to take 18 months off because I had basically 18 months of money. And so the plan was to try and make it somewhere before the money ran out. And that goal was New Zealand. So I wanted to sail down the west coast of the US into Mexico, cross over to French Polynesia, and then make it to New Zealand before the money ran out. And then I was just going to figure it out. And I really didn't think too much about like, hey, I'm going to go back to work right away. I just knew that at that point in my life, it was something that I absolutely had to do. And I knew it was, not the best financially responsible decision, but I didn't really care. I was going to do it anyway. And so I sold everything and went for it. And then after about, 2.5 years into this 18-month budget, we were really broke. And so,
Yeah.
we were living off of the credit cards, and we happened to make it to Australia, where we put Delos in a yard. And then I went back to work for a year, and so did Brady. And then, Karen was working, and everybody's working. And then we pulled our money together for the next season. And that's how we did it. But yeah, I mean, I guess it was intended to be like a sabbatical kind of thing, but it wasn't supposed to be a permanent endeavor. And I certainly didn't set out to make it a business or a lifestyle business at all. That just happened organically and really quite unplanned along the trip. And we were making writing blogs for our family and our friends. We wrote about 300 blogs with photos about stories, and a few people were reading them, people that I used to work with, and my mom and dad and stuff like that. And then we kind of got the idea that, hey, it would be cool to, instead of just writing and taking photos, to show people what the lifestyle is really about and film all the silly things we do and the boat breaking and, the beautiful sails and the amazing beaches and the crappy places we go to and the good times and the bad. And we just did it mainly for our family and our friends. And then we noticed that other people were subscribing and watching. And then we figured, well, if other people are interested, then maybe there is something here. Maybe we can actually fund this lifestyle by making videos about this lifestyle. And that really became possible with Patreon, is when it the first 3 years we were just sort of, taking on people and almost like a backpacker boat, like, hey, pay $125 a week. We'll share food and fuel and insurance, and then we're all going to have fun. And that got us through the first couple of years until the whole project became sustainable, which took a while. It took a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, as a viewer, I've watched almost all the videos except for the most recent ones. And like, you can definitely see the quality of the product increases. Like, you become more confident, everybody becomes more confident. Like, you can tell it's very good. Like, it's sort of like it's like when people talk about quantity over quality, like if you just do quantity, you get to quality eventually, right? Because you've done it so many times,
Yeah.
it just like, it starts to get very good.
We definitely worked on that. Yeah.
So one thing that people asked me was like, do you ever think like, hey, I want to make my life more private. Like, I'm sort of getting tired of this YouTube thing, or I want to like have some time where I'm not always like on the world stage.
Well, we do take that time. We like I said, we just went to Sweden for a couple of months and we didn't film anything. We didn't do anything. We didn't take any photos. We barely did any social media posts. It was just really our time to be with our family over the holidays. And there's definitely these periods where we go through where we are having an amazing time and everything is new and fun. And that's when we tend to do a lot of filming. And then there's other downtimes where we don't. And I think, like most things in life, it is all about balance. Of course, there's some days where I think like, oh man, I'm so tired of YouTube and, the YouTube algorithm and worrying about views and if somebody's going to watch the video, or, if we're going to be able to continue to do this. And then sometimes like, oh, this is great. This is the best job in the world. And I guess it's like anything, right?
Yeah, for sure. So yesterday I put on Twitter, like I asked people that are interactive with me on Twitter what they wanted to know. And so I often hang out with digital nomads. And so one of the questions that I think that one person asked, and also I'm interested in as well, because I'm originally from Ohio, American, but I've lived in Hong Kong for like a decade or so, renounced citizenship, like I've been dealing with like global taxation issues and like compliance and financial stuff most of my life. And I think that's a big issue for digital nomads. Like they're from one country, they're trying to live in like Thailand, or they're trying to like travel around like full time, but they're having to deal with regulatory issues, like tax issues, like insurance issues, like, and I imagine just with a boat, you also have like this big asset that's like worth money and moving around. Like, could you talk a little bit about like what sort of, like the question I got was, are you a fiscal, I think it was targeted toward non-Americans. It was like, are you a fiscal resident in any country? So like for Europeans, they're either resident in Europe and they're taxed, or they're not, but then to not be there, they have to become resident somewhere else. It's like all very complicated. I know Americans have a different set of issues. But like, yeah, so what, like, how is that like? I mean, you must have to maintain an address someplace. Like, how do you deal with banks? Like, do you still do everything out of the US? Like, could you talk a little bit about your experience and the challenges you've had to that, if any, or like how it is,
sure.
like
No,
basically being a digital nomad, but on a boat?
Yeah. Well, you nailed it. As an American citizen, you have the what is it? How do I put this? There's no running from the US government, right? Like you have the luxury of being taxed everywhere in the world, no matter what you're doing. And so, because myself and Brady were US citizens and my dad has a house in Florida, when we started this, I created an LLC in the US, in the state of Florida, because they have no state income tax. You can do it online. It's quite easy. I could use my dad's address as like the registered address for the bank account and all of that stuff. I have a social security number, so I'm sort of in the system. And so it was pretty straightforward. And so that's basically what we do. Is we're a US based LLC, limited liability company. I don't know what the equivalent would be in other countries, but it's a legal tax status. We file our taxes. The taxes in the US, when you look at some other countries, are actually not that bad. Because we do it as a business, we get to deduct everything related to filming and production of videos, because that's the business. And so, a lot of the things for the boat, we can legally write off, our travel expenses, our cameras, our drones, all of those things become, tax deductions. And so we have a CPA that's in the US, and, to keep us in compliance with everything. We have a 401k plan, sort of like a normal job, so we're able to put a little bit of retirement savings away, because Karen and I are married now. Any income that she has also gets reported on my tax return for the US, because then she's a spouse. But we still pay less taxes than if we were in Sweden, for example. But we get virtually, the only benefit we get, I guess, is the US flag on the boat, and being able to use the US financial system for our banking and our business, and the laws and all that. But we don't really have any other benefits other than that, I suppose.
Have you run into any, like, one of the problems people run into is like banking issues, like, for example, Chase. Like, Chase decides, like, oh, we have a problem with your account, we want you to come into a branch. Do you ever have that? I hear that from a lot of Americans abroad.
All the time. Yeah, definitely. But I actually have a number of banks, right? So, because that happens where, an ATM somewhere will just take your debit card, or you'll lose your wallet when you just can't get a new one. And so I have a couple different accounts that are used for, like, we have one main account that is the business account. If I ever need to, I can call my dad and be like, hey, Dad, can you go down to the branch and ask them about this or do something? So he helps us out a little bit on that. And then the other ones are just like emergency accounts where I need to go to the ATM and get some money out. I have this other account, I'll transfer funds in there, use this debit card. Yeah, it is a bit of a trick, though. Yeah, the main thing that was difficult was because we always change SIM cards all the time, because we move from country to country so often. And every banking and most other websites now require like one-time authorization codes to be sent via SMS or sometimes WhatsApp if you're lucky. And so, I need to keep a US number, which is kind of a silly thing to have to do, but I do it specifically so that I can do these online validations and just roam all over the world with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have that same problem. My Google Fi account just stopped like working overseas, so I have to figure out how to get another one again.
That happened to us last year as well. Google Fi worked great but then they caught us.
Yeah, they caught everybody. I mean, I know like at least a dozen people in Hong Kong that use Google Fi for US banking. So speaking of like writing off like camera equipment, like one question people wanted to know was like how much camera equipment do you have? Like how many different cameras? And also just sort of like, but how do you work that into like your, I guess, just your sailing routine? Like, for example, like when something bad happens, you guys are really great about like, you grab a camera and start filming it. So it's in the show, but like, I know I've had bad things happen, and like the worst thing, the last thing I'm thinking about is, oh, let me grab a camera and film this. How did you work that into your routine? And like, how like, I guess cumbersome is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still a little bit interesting to take a camera with you most places that you go, and certainly it puts people off sometimes if you're walking through like a really, like a very cool market or a bazaar or something, and you have this giant camera in your hands. People are like, well, what are these people doing? Why are they putting this thing in our face? And it just changes the interaction with people. And so we try and be aware of that. We use a bunch of different cameras. We have what we would call our very cinematic camera, which is the big DLSR, or it's a mirrorless camera actually. It's a Sony A7S III with a couple of different lenses. It's a very, very cool, very powerful camera. We also have a Panasonic GH5, which we used before that and is now our dive camera. We have a big like a Nautilus housing for that. We have like a special night camera that's a Psionics camera that's very low light sensitive. And then we have what's called the dad cam, which is like what you would see any dad go to the soccer game and fill their kids with. It's like, you know, the camcorder you put your hand on like this, and you know,
Oh, wow.
you hit the button, and it's got, you know, good stabilization, and it's not the most amazing camera, but you can give this camera to anybody in virtually any condition, and they're going to be able to use it. So we use that one quite a bit. It's, what is that one? What's the dad cam, Kaz? It's a Sony something. I can't remember what it is. It's a handy cam, sort of like that. And then we have a number of action cameras. So we have like our about 4 or 5 different GoPros, ranging from like, I mean, we go through them pretty fast because we abuse the heck out of them, but you know, they're mostly 9s, 10s, and 11s. We have, I think, 4 or 5 now, with clamps that we can use for time lapses and moving all over the boat. We have the 360 camera, that's the Fusion 360, that's pretty cool. And the Insta 360, and then what else do we have? Oh, drones. We have 3 drones on the boat. Phantoms, DJI Phantoms, and Mavics. And we have so many because if we lose one, then we just can't buy another one, right? So we always have like one old one that we keep, and then we buy a new one, and then we buy the next new one. We keep the last 2 sort of as like backups, in case something happens or we lose one or we ruin one or something like that. And then occasionally we even use our phones, because the quality of the phones is so good now. You can use those, and you can, if it's all you have, then you can get a shot like that. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
No, that's absolutely. I just, it's a lot. I know we have a few photographers that come to our sailing events. And one of them, I was driving the safety rib at one of the races, and like he got on with this massive like kit of like camera stuff and pulled out a drone and then like went to launch it, and it was like upside down and it flew directly into the ocean. And he's like, "Oh, don't worry, that's like the 5th one I've lost this month." It's just crazy. I imagine everything goes into the ocean when you have it out there.
Yeah, it definitely does.
So I know I've over the years you've upgraded Delos a lot. You added more solar. You got the big dome for the internet. What else? You put lithium batteries in, things like this. What would you say was your biggest quality of life upgrade? And this question comes from a digital nomad tech guy that's like sort of sailing around his boat and working at a startup, and wanted to know this.
Okay. How about the alcohol stills that we have on board? No, just kidding.
I forgot about those.
I think there's a bunch of changes that we've made to the boat. I think if I had to summarize it, I could give you the 2 top ones, probably lithium batteries, and because that whole package with solar and wind power and the induction stove and the big inverter and being able to get rid of propane on board has been a huge quality improvement for us, because we used to always be running short on propane, and when you cook with propane, it's putting heat into the downstairs. And I've had 2 propane fires on board over the years, and so I was quite happy to get rid of that. The second thing is definitely the internet. I mean, especially for the business that we're running, to be able to have like true kind of broadband speed internet has been a real game changer for us. The Viasat team has been amazing. We were one of the first boats that they put that dome on. We were able to give the team a lot of feedback on what worked and what didn't, and they've incorporated into the production models that are out there now. But unfortunately, they do not have their Pacific satellite launched yet. And so when we leave Mexico, we're going to be back to the old way we used to do things, which is, you know, using the Iridium Go and local SIM cards. And so it's going to be a pretty huge adjustment for us. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I did the lithium upgrade, and I would say that would hands down was like the most amazing thing. I just see so many sailors in our community. They don't really understand electrical systems that much, and they like end up getting with AGMs or or I even see the ones with the lead acid where you have to add the water, and they like, you know, you use your electric winch for like 2-3 hours out cruising, and then you get like the low battery alarm is going off, and that's that's because, you know, that we don't have shore power in Hong Kong generally, so we're all on moorings. So like their batteries are
Okay.
never charged, and then like
Right.
because of that they like go through them like crazy. But then lithium is just really, people worry that lithium, I think in my experience, worry that lithium is going to be really hard to deal with. But I found it just like, it's like such an improvement. Like it's so easy to like maintain. You don't
Yeah.
have to do anything basically.
Yeah. And it's an incredible amount of usable capacity for the batteries, right? You can run them down, charge them up. They last a long time. Yeah, it's a good deal.
And they're clean. They don't like put off gas, and they don't leak liquids or
Right. And they're lighter too, like half the weight. Yeah.
have you considered coming to this part of Asia, like Hong Kong, northern, I mean, I guess China, so the South China coast, or like
Yeah,
I know
you
you were in
know,
Thailand, but Vietnam, like that place.
we were in the Philippines. And we sailed into Manila, and we really wanted to come up the coast with the intention of getting to Japan. But this was before were the videos were doing well, and before we were able to be sustainable, and we ran out of money. And I figured, well, you know, if we're going to run out of money, I don't think Japan is a very smart place to be. We better go back to Malaysia, where a marina is, you know, super cheap, and we can live cheap, and we can figure something out. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would love to sail up to Japan. And I believe kind of Hong Kong would be what if you went west from the Philippines and then up, is what, Taiwan, and then my geography isn't that good up in the area, but where's Hong Kong related in relation to the Philippines?
So from here to the Philippines, I think it's 140 degrees you'd sail. So it's southeast of
Yeah.
here. So you'd go like north by northwest or so.
Yeah.
People would
Well,
definitely help you.
we sort of looked into cruising into Vietnam, and we saw how difficult the entry process would have been. Maybe it's changed since then. It was a long time ago, but it just sort of, yeah, looked difficult. They treated us like a
I mean,
commercial vessel, you know.
how do you like so I mean, in terms of like the paper, like the port formality paperwork, like how big of a hassle is that for you? Like what's the worst country you've seen? Not to, I don't want you to get in trouble in any countries here, but like do you have to hire agents to do it? Like, is it usually something you can do yourself?
Some places you do. Most recently, Costa Rica was incredibly difficult. They just started, as of this season, allowing you to check yourself in and out. Otherwise, the agent fee was like $500 to come in and $450 to leave, and they just made it very, very difficult for you. By far, the most difficult country was India. So when we sailed to the Andaman Islands, you know, we had to get inspected by the local police, the federal police, the 3 different branches of the Navy, and then customs, and then it was literally like a 3-day process. Where you go into like a French island in the Caribbean, you literally just set your hook or grab a mooring or whatever, you dinghy into the town dock, you go to the close, you know, coffee shop, and you have like a coffee or a beer, and you type your stuff into the computer, and then, you know, 15 minutes later it's done. So that's the two opposites. Like I remember Singapore, you anchored in the specific area, and then they come out to you with these giant handles with like, you know, nuts on the end, and you put your passports and your documents and your papers in a bag, and you throw it in this net, and then the guy takes it inside the boat, and then 10 minutes later he gives you your passports and everything back stamped, and then you're done. And so it's kind of all over the place, right? You still have to do the same thing, obviously, that you do when you check into a country through an airline or an airplane. You still have to clear customs, you still have to clear immigration, sometimes there's a health inspection. But you have to do it all on your own. You have to track it. You know, most of the places you have to track down on your own. New Zealand and Australia, you actually sail into a quarantine dock. It's sort of like, it's actually a caged off dock where you have to sit and all the officers come to you. And then other places you have to go driving around. Like in Brazil, we had to go drive for like 4 hours to go find the nearest customs office or police. And it's just like, this is so random, but it's pretty much all over the place.
I think it's, especially for people, non-sailors that have done this, I think people don't realize how in some places, like in Hong Kong, it's, I mean, you need to have the license, but besides that, it's pretty lax. You basically just like show up here, like, and then like you're supposed to go to like this immigration building within 24 hours and check yourself in. And the same, I
Yeah.
think the boat is like 72 hours, but like in reality, like, I mean, they know, the Marine Department knows that you've come in, they see your AIS, they have your radar, but like, there's no, like, it's not like the airport where there's like a gate that like, you can't go through unless you're checked in. Like you're already here, you're
Right.
wandering around the city.
I mean, even for the US now, there's an app, right? So you call Customs and Border Patrol on the app, they video conference with you,
Oh, wow.
and then it's pretty
You're
slick.
done. Cool. So what is next for Delos? So I mean, you mentioned a little bit about a new boat. I know there's people have been speculating for years, like is there going to be a Delos 2.0? Like what are you thinking in terms of like longer term? I mean, you mentioned that you want to do some other types of sailing. What about for your daughter? Like what is she, when she gets to school age, would you like go someplace like so she can go to school and then maybe sail part-time? Like what are you thinking, like
Yeah, I mean
towards
that's an
retirement?
option.
Like
I mean, right now we're for retirement, I'm going to sail around the world. No,
okay,
for like
you're gonna retire. For retirement, you're gonna go get a job. You're gonna go work
right.
on a
I'm
desk.
gonna go back to the 9 to 5. So I mean, right now we're just super stoked to spend some time in the South Pacific. I mean, it's just such an amazing place, and we're right there, and the boat's almost ready, and it's just going to be fantastic. But we have sort of put a lot of thought into what could possibly be a home base, and I think right now we're thinking, Sweden. Karen has her family there. Sierra's born in Sweden, so she's got dual citizenship. It's just a great lifestyle, and I mean, if we had our dream opportunity, then we would be able to spend more time in Sweden. And while we're there, maybe we could even start building a custom built aluminum boat or something like that. Would kind of be the long term dream. It would take years, and we could do it while working.
Build it yourself, or
yeah, for sure. Yeah, because
oh, wow.
I just got a quote to get a design built that I'm interested in, and the quote was like $1.6 million US, and that's just I don't know, that's a lot. That's a lot. It's a very cool boat, but I don't think it's $1.6 million cool. So we're gonna have to find another way to do it ourselves by leveraging our audience, and there's a lot of experts out there. I think we'd be able to get an expert team of people to help us with welding and carpentry and electrical and everything, and just make a project out of it. So that could be fun. And at the same time, spend time there, get Sierra in school, which I think she'd really enjoy, and just to show her like her culture and her heritage from Sweden, and then spend the rest of our time sailing. So maybe let's say summers in Sweden and winters somewhere in the South Pacific would be pretty cool.
Okay. Yeah. That's cool. What people were wondering, what you visit the Amel plant, like were they not interested in doing sort of like a La Vagabond sort of deal where they give you one of the nice new Amel 60s and then, or like I don't know, they lend it to you or something like that? It seems like like Amel is popular today basically because of Delos, in my view. Like
well, thank you. We had a great time with those guys. I think
I think you know Morgan Grace from our club, who he and his brother Tristan hung out with you in South Africa, and he worships you, I worship you, like he bought the same boat as you, so did I. And so I think that we all became sort of like, I don't think we would have even heard of the Amel cult like if it wasn't for Delos. And it seems kind of crazy to me like that Amel hasn't leveraged this more.
Well, they do sell quite a few boats, and we hear from people that buy them, both new and used. But they're very peculiar about their brand and what they think it is. And they when we first talked to them, they did say, hey, what do you guys want to do? Do you see any? This is the new boat that we're coming up with. It's the new Amel 50. It's sloop rigged, and then I said, well, we'd more like to go with the more expeditionary style. What about the evolution of more the ketch or the Super Maramu concept with some different ideas? And I think, my thoughts were like this, and their thoughts were kind of like this. And so there really wasn't a connection for the future there. And I didn't want to just do it just for the, sponsorship or money or anything like that, because it didn't really, nothing's for free, right? I mean, absolutely nothing in this world is for free. There's always something attached to it. And so, yeah, it just wasn't the right path for either us or them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I think some other channels that have gone that route, like I actually don't follow them in many sailing channels. So like, but I've looked at them, and you feel like you're getting like pitched to like buy this boat because like somebody gave it to us for free. And like, whereas you watch Delos and you can see you really like, you believe in the boat you bought because that's why you bought it. It's like, I think the Super Maramu was almost like sort of the peak of the Amel, and maybe the 54 was pretty nice. But then they sort of went toward this, like, it looks more like a big Beneteau. Like, it's not as bad as a Beneteau, but it's like it's a sloop rigged. It's like got the really wide stern. It's got the two rudders that you worry about like falling off. Like, and you sort of wonder what are they doing with their brand and what problem are they solving? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably following the market, right? I think there's probably a lot more people who are looking for $1 million, or they can sell like a few multi-million-dollar Mediterranean cruisers rather than, good solid cruising boats. And I mean, obviously, it's got to make fiscal sense for them, right? They're just after a different market segment, I guess.
And the Amel was the first ketch I ever sailed, and I can't believe more people don't sail ketches. They just,
I think they sail
they're
great.
just so much
It's
easier, and like
I love sailing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, and like just not even, sometimes if there's a lot of wind, like don't use the main, just like and the mizzen, it's just like really epic.
Yeah,
like, epic
exactly.
like sail configuration,
really
and
well balanced. It's great.
And using the mizzen to like hoist stuff up, it's just like you have a built-in crane. It's just it's really hard for me to understand why more people haven't been sold on this concept. How do you remain calm? Like when you like, I think a lot of really good sailors are very calm. And like, so I guess the example that somebody gave was that recently Kaza got sick. I actually haven't watched this episode yet, so but that she got sick, and they said that you were very calm throughout the whole time when you were filming. Like, how do you sort of generate that reaction? Because like some people in stressful situations, they sort of like lose their ability to focus. They go crazy. Like, is that from experience? Have you always been like that?
I think it's part of my like old engineering mindset. I'm like, okay, we have a problem. We're going to solve this problem. What are the steps we need to take to solve this problem? And then you just start like isolating and troubleshooting, right? And of course, it's like my wife and the mother of my child, and I love her more than anything in the world, and I would do anything for her. But flipping out in the middle of nowhere doesn't get anybody anywhere. And so we just had to like figure out. Luckily we do have the internet on board, and so we were in constant communication with doctors, a doctor in the US and another doctor in Mexico, and we were getting evaluations and say, okay, try this, and then if this doesn't work, then we're going to move on to this, and if that doesn't work, then eventually we got to the point where, okay, you should get her to a hospital, and then then that was our goal. Then we were going to get her seek medical attention. And I don't know. Of course, I was worried and scared, and I was flustered. But I don't know. I don't know.
Do you think that's? Yeah, I mean, I know it's a really hard question. I mean, do you think? So you think that's from perhaps like engineering background? Is it also? This is something also I also think about, because I've noticed as I become more experienced, I also become more calm, because things that I thought like maybe I was stressed out in the past. Let me say this another way. So when I grew up sailing on Lake Erie with my parents, and I noticed that my dad often was very stressed out. Like from when I was Sierra's age. Like I think they bought a boat when I was like born, and that I grew up on it like on the weekends. And I remember my parents would get stressed out and like argue. And in hindsight, once I became a sailor on my own right and owned a boat, I think that was from that my dad's level of sailing was actually not that, he was not that confident. Like he didn't have that much experience. Like he didn't race. And I think, so I noticed in myself when I get to an area where I'm not very comfortable with, I tend to get stressed out. And do you think like, and so one of the ways I try to solve that is, one, I try to sail with other people that are more experienced, and the two, I try to like learn a lot, like, first aid certification courses, like I'm doing my Yacht Master offshore
Yep.
like next month. Like I try to just like any way I can like acquire knowledge, whether it be like experience or like textbook, I try to do, and I think that helps me. Is that an approach that you took? Did you do much formal training, or did you try to seek out
So,
like other experienced people?
we did. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we did is everybody on the boat got their STCW 95. I don't know if you know what that was like. Yep. So it's basically like what you would get to qualify to work on a commercial ship, including first aid, medical care, life raft deployment, first aid, survival at sea, all these things. And then over the years, like we've seen a lot of accidents, and we've learned from other people's mistakes. We've had a few ourselves. People have gotten sick, but you got bit by the barracuda. There's been cuts, scrapes, bruises, knocks on the heads, food poisoning, bad UTIs where people haven't told me that it burns when they pee for like a week, and you're like, well, why didn't you tell me a week ago? Like, we could have started you on antibiotics, and now it's like, now you need intravenous antibiotics, and now we got to take you to a doctor.
Oh yeah.
But I guess over time you just get kind of not really. You try not to be, what is it, not nonchalant about it, or I don't know what the word I'm looking for. But because there are important problems, but I do think that like after a while, the experience of knowing how to deal with certain problems, it's just it's just like part of being human, right? And also,
yeah, absolutely.
The other cool thing is, I get to sail now. In the past, I always sailed with Brady and with Karen, and now I'm sailing with Karen, and she's just a strong, experienced sailor in her own right, and I can bounce things off of her. She can bounce things off of me, and we have a real good kind of like, yeah, maybe this doesn't make sense. Like in the recent hurricane we just went through, we had to make a pretty big call about do we go to the hurricane hole that we were headed for, or do we make a right turn and sail 140 miles out of our way? And so we looked at all the weather, and we looked at all the models, and we looked at all the information, and we said, okay, I don't care if we change our plans, or if we need to sail across the Sea of Cortez, that's what we're going to do, because we think it's the right call. And we kind of made that decision together by just chatting about it over a day or two. It wasn't an easy one to make.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just having experienced crew, and especially if your loved one is really great. And that's actually one of the reasons I love this club, because we have so many experienced sailors, and when I'm like new boat owner, I can like plenty of people that are happy to sail with me and share their experience. And it really like, I just can't imagine ever becoming a new boat owner in an area that didn't have a lot of experienced sailors, and like how lonely it must feel when you don't have like this sort of like big group of people that are happy to help.
Or a single-handed sailor or something. Very, very different ballgame, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One last question is, do you miss Brady, and like when is he coming? When are he and Drew going to come back for a cameo on Delos?
Yes, of course I miss Brady. It was amazing. We shared, it was for two brothers to be able to sail around the world together for a decade and come out of it like pretty good. Cool. I mean, it's incredible. Karen and I were starting a family, and Brady really wanted to start his own business and kind of go out on his own with Alex, and they started their sailing school in Lake Tahoe, which is doing very well. And then they bought their blue water boat, Lentica, and they've actually just sailed her down from San Francisco into Mexico. And we're probably going to see them in about a month. So we'll actually be buddy boating together, which should be super cool. So I'm really excited about that. So maybe we'll see Brady on videos coming out this season, but he'll be on his own.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely have to stay tuned for that. Yeah, that was, I think as a viewer, like you guys just had a really great dynamic too. Like it wasn't just that you were brothers, but you have complementary personalities.
Very much.
And sort of like if you're casting people for Delos, you'd be like, these are two great people to cast for Delos, because it just makes it
we still have a lot of fun.
Yeah, more fun to watch. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, my
Um,
pleasure. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Brian here from SV Delos. Just want to give a shout out to the Royal Hong Kong Yacht Club and hope you enjoy our 80 North Series about sailing up on top of the world up to Svalbard. Enjoy.